Hey, ladies and gentlemen of the internet. While I've been on this platform that is YouTube and content creation online for nearly over 15 plus years, if I had to break that up and look at the stages of my career, I'd say it started with my passion and hobby era, my career and business era, and then ultimately the post content creation era. You see, it's humbling and amazing that I even have the opportunity to look back at myself and see the career trajectory over those last 15 years. But in doing so recently, I've also had to ask myself questions like, what would I have changed? What did I learn? And ultimately, what's in it for the future? So sit back, relax, while we unpack and take a look at what would it be like if I was to start my YouTube/content creation career all over again. So to understand all of that, we have to take a look and break down the eras, starting with my hobby/passion era, the one that really got it all started, quite literally the start of it, and that was in 2006 to 2008 when I first jumped on and uploaded my first video to YouTube. I talk about this a lot, but obviously I was, 11 years old at the time. I was uploading videos about my passion for technology, and I had honestly no idea what I was doing. Hence, again, being 11 years old. But content creation back then was a totally different landscape. That goes without saying. YouTube was a different space. It was really just kind of getting on the scene. There wasn't a concept of being a YouTuber or making a living doing content creation, at least back then. And to be honest, this was the most exciting time of my content creation journey. And I'd argue for those of you aspiring to be content creators out there in whatever field, it should be for you too, because this is the stage where you're learning the most, you're absorbing the most knowledge, you're developing your taste for your content and the things that you want to create. And again, you're just naive and going into it for the first time. It's really truly an example of ignorance is bliss. You don't know what you don't know at this stage. And there's not much I would change about these early years because, again, it's eventually what was transformative into building out where I'm at today. If there's a sense of what I learned in those early years, it was truly about developing my voice as a creator and getting comfortable within that. When I started on YouTube, it wasn't the cool thing to be doing, uploading videos on YouTube, especially on like technology and gadgets and gizmos. I was embarrassed about it personally in real life, and I was, of course, harassed online by millions of strangers as a prepubescent teen on the internet. But I had to let go of that notion of like what others thought of me and what I was doing, and I had to create based on what I was passionate about. And I was always creating for an audience of one, in the sense that if there was one person, even if it was just myself, who learned something from it or was happy and took away something from that content, that's all it took. And I've always carried that with me throughout. So again, that was the important lesson I learned very early on in that start and in that era of like getting on YouTube and just creating for the sake of creating and being a hobby and passion of mine. Now that gets me into the business/career era in 2008 through 2013. Honestly, this is where a lot starts to pick up pace and a lot happens in this kind of 4 or 5 year span. It really changes the game for me, at least. You see, in 2008, they launched the YouTube Partnership Program, where essentially it's a variation of what exists today in that YouTube will monetize your content. And back then, they would throw banner ads and text link ads. There weren't video ads next to your videos. And if people click them, you would essentially get revenue through AdSense. I applied for this program as soon as I had the opportunity to. I think they had like a small cap back then of like you had to have a certain amount of subscribers and views and whatnot. Very loose requirements back then, and it wasn't all documented. But essentially, YouTube Partnership not just got you monetization, but back then it also got you a slew of features that most people don't realize. Back in that era of YouTube, you couldn't upload videos beyond 10 minutes. You had file size limits. There were certain features that were only limited to partners. So I really, really wanted to earn that partnership seal verification. First time I got denied. Second time, however, 2 months later, as my channel was growing, the Laker Cool Man channel, I eventually got accepted, and I was over the moon.
Hey guys, Cauguiran here. I am now an official YouTube partner. Awesome, guys.
I had to use my parents' bank account because I wasn't even old enough to really accept payment back then. But nonetheless, it kind of flipped the switch that was crazy to me because I remember earning my first like $80 paycheck or whatever it was. I think the threshold was like also similar to today where it's like right around 100. But I was like, whoa, like I get to get paid for this thing that I was already doing for free for the last like 2.5 years. And as you imagine, that added up and up as my views got bigger and my channel got bigger. And the rates were much more generous back then, but nonetheless, it opened all these opportunities and doors for me. And I was just taking that money and pouring it back in, buying new stuff, buying better equipment, upgrading quality of the channel, buying new stuff to review for the YouTube channel, on and on and on. This kind of endless cycle. And this is really where I started to develop, and this is where I learned the most about the business side of content creation, like the actual what goes into making a profit, revenue streams, how content creators make a living, at least back then, again, in that landscape. And this is a blessing and curse. You see, making money for the first time, even if it was $1, $10, whatever, skewed my perception as a content creator. Because up until that point, I was always just creating for the sake of creating. But when you introduce money and profits and that business side to it, obviously it's going to skew it to some degree, right? And in that first year of being in the partnership program, there's a lot of success, a lot of growth, a lot of scale of my channel. And then it all kind of came crashing down when I lost YouTube partnership. And by lost it, I mean I got banned from the partnership program, rightfully so, because when I was younger, I was like promoting and telling people to click on my ads. I'm sure I was clicking some of my own ads because I said it helped out to make revenue for the channel. I was like 13, 14, didn't know what I was doing. And that was clearly, obviously, a violation of the AdSense agreement terms. I tried to appeal it, appeal. Nothing, and understandably so, manifested from that. And I was devastated when I had lost the partnership that I worked so hard to get the year prior. And it kind of felt like I was back at square one because I had gotten a taste of this good life, but then it was taken away from me. And then I forced myself to learn about different revenue streams. And then again, this business side that I was just talking about, because I was like, I don't want to rely on this one source of revenue. If I'm ever going to make this a thing, a job, a career, whatever, I don't want to be dependent on one thing. And this is even a problem you still see today when people get banned from certain platforms. So I learned to diversify. I learned what other avid revenue streams I could utilize and take advantage of just my audience and the community I had built up to that point. I signed up for affiliate programs. I signed up for Amazon Associates. I contacted people directly in companies I wanted to work with and see if they want to sponsor blog posts or buy banner space on my website. I remember I used to follow a YouTuber by the name of Chris Pro back in the day. He used to sell like ad spots for like a couple grand because his site was so much traffic. And I was like, what if I could do that for like $200 a month or $100 for the week? I experimented with all these different ad pricing programs. And I remember when I first sold one, I was like, whoa, this is crazy. I'm like putting somebody's logo on my site for a week and they're paying me money to do that. Like this wasn't nothing new in terms of like the advertising space on the internet. Like obviously that had been around, but it was my first experience with it. So I learned a lot essentially in 2008 through 13 about the business side of content creation outside of just YouTube partnership. The caveat or the flip side of that is, I would say the blessing and curse side of this is that it changed my perception of content creation. I was still creating content that I loved, don't get me wrong, but there was an aspect and notion of like, oh, how do I maximize this on the business side as well? And as anybody can tell you as a creator, when you start to get too caught up in the numbers and the nuances and things of that nature, it can be a recipe for disaster if you don't balance it out well. Now, for me, what ultimately led to, and I say why it was a curse, is if I didn't lose YouTube partnership, ultimately, I think the Laker Coolman channel still exists today and maybe is much bigger on YouTube than it would have been. It's easy to say that in hindsight, but at the same time, I don't think I learned all the business side of that space if that doesn't happen. Because ultimately, what came from that is me starting digital dojos. I ended up moving away from the Laker Coolman channel and put all my efforts there because I knew that the Laker Coolman channel at that point was a lost cause in terms of the business side of things. So again, it was a blessing in that it taught me a lot, a curse in that it jaded my view in some aspects from the creative side. Now, within that era of business and career, I actually leave this gap out of like the 2013, 14, 15 era before the 2016 era comes into play. And technically that should all be bunched up together. It should really be 2008 through 2015, truly, because 2013, I graduated high school. I knew at this point I was going all in on content creation. I had consciously made that decision like my junior year of high school, but this is where it was actually taking effect. So at this point, I'd done everything to gear up and prepare myself for that. Digital Dojo is a content network I had started with a couple of my colleagues on YouTube, eventually passed down to me when everybody kind of went their separate ways. And I kind of went all in on building that content network out. At the same time, that summer after I graduated, I had started a business by the name of ScreenCap, where I was making content for app developers, promotional materials for like mobile apps, which was like booming at the time. And that business quickly surpassed what I was doing on YouTube alone. Like very quickly in a span of the year, that business was making 2x and then eventually 3x what my other revenue streams were doing. So I put a lot of my efforts into that, as you can imagine. So I was juggling a bunch of things in that kind of 2013, 2014, 2015 era. And businesses were at an all-time high. Like the profits, revenue, everything was great on paper. Personally, creatively, however, I was what you would call burnt out. And even though I didn't realize it at the time, nor wanted to admit it, I was doing so much for ScreenCap as I was growing while kind of losing a sense of passion for the space. Like I remember I used to do so many videos. I used to review so many apps and get to look at so many like different things in the mobile space that I just got tired of doing like mobile app videos. Then that transferred eventually over when I had to do videos for Digital Dojos. I was like tired to do my own content because I had just done like 40, 50 videos for a client or whatever it was. And drastically, Digital Dojo started to fall. At that same time, I was also just trying to do so much in terms of just like content creation as a space. And this is one thing I will say I definitely would have changed if I could have back then. It's that in that 2008 through 2015 era, I tried so much to kind of mirror and be what I aspired and saw out there in the content creation space. I wanted to do my own podcast network like Twit, which was a very famous tech podcast network. I wanted to have like a series like Revision 3, if you knew what Revision 3 was back in the day, where like I just had different video podcasts and video shows also. I wanted to have a successful YouTube channel and continue to build that out, like all my favorite creators. I had a blog and content network that I was still uploading to at digitaldojos.com. I was just trying to do so much in this space that I spread myself thin and arguably didn't overtly succeed in any of those, right? And that was the first time like I had to learn like what it meant to be like, you can be like a jack of all trades and a master of none, or you can truly just try to succeed in one area. And it's the reason why like content creators will always tell you, especially advice for new content creators, is to focus on consistency, creating consistency for your audience. That can mean things like scheduled content, or it can mean consistent quality of content. And the problem with me was that I was trying to do too much where the quality was subpar and it was across multiple avenues. And again, I wish back then I would have just sat and really focused on YouTube or focused on whatever, picked one and really just focused on it. It's truly what I wish I would have done. And then when I was better equipped to handle the other stuff, then branch out and so on. And I think, arguably it's easy again to say, but I think I would be in a different position, at least for things like Digital Dojos, if I had done that. Now, that eventually gets us to 2016 through current time frame. Like I said, business was booming. A lot was going on. I was starting to become burnt out. And what I learned at this point is that burnout was a real thing. Like just pure, flat out. 2016 rolls around. And I remember after my 21st birthday in January, I professionally just felt like everything was doing great on paper. Like everything that you can quantify as success, that box is checked, that box is checked, that box is checked. Business was only growing like year after year after year. And at the same time, while I was working a lot and working hard, I also just kind of felt like I wasn't passionate about it. I vividly remember a story where I was out with friends on the summer. Like we were out, I don't even remember what we were doing. We were just hanging out late at night. And I remember getting like a flood of invoices from a client for a new project. Like back then I used to use like PayPal as one of my invoicing systems. And basically people can place orders through the website. And essentially it meant to me like, okay, you got this project, you got this job or this gig. And they would pay, back then they would have to pay ahead for the job and the work. And essentially it was just like money that was like going into my pocket. And I was just seeing these notifications come in. And I was like, dang, like this feels so like, on one hand, great from the business, great to get money, great to get paid. On the other hand, it felt so like unfulfilling, if that in a weird way makes sense, like creatively. Like, I don't know. I didn't know how to describe it, but I just remember that feeling and holding on to that and thinking like, I gotta change it up. Like this isn't right. Like I should be happy about this stuff, but I'm not, on the opposite end, right? So 2016 comes around and I decide to move stateside. I left home. I leave my family. I leave my friends to move to San Francisco in hopes of a change of pace and to kind of force myself in a new environment. And at this point, I knew I was kind of leave the content creation stuff behind. I took hiatus from the YouTube channels. I told my clients I was going to finish up any current projects and then put them on hold. Eventually, I ended up closing down Screen Cap after moving to the States. At this point, I was just fully burnt out. And again, that's really truly what I learned at this stage, was that like you can be doing good in all aspects in terms of what might typically be quantified as success in terms of business and numbers and blah, blah, blah. But if you're not happy doing it, or if you're not fulfilled doing it, then, why do it at that point? I knew I had to pick something else. I knew I had to move into a different venture and take time for myself to figure out what that was. And that's what 2016-17 was for me. It was kind of like a gap year. And it was a struggle, I'll be honest. It was a struggle, at least mentally and personally, in the sense that I did feel like, in a weird way, I felt like a failure because I was walking away for what I just spent the last decade of my life building up until that point. And arguably I walked away like at what was my peak in terms of the space. But I just knew like I had to look for what was next. And while that year was tough and while that time was tough and stressful, and there's many times where I thought like, oh, I'm just going to go back to content creation because it's like easy, it's what I know. I had to stop myself a lot. And I just knew I wasn't like, I would go back into it for the wrong reasons, right? The passion at that point was kind of gone. So I learned all of that. I come to realization of that, and I start focusing and trying out different things, kind of exploring the space. And eventually I build out, a new life and living here in San Francisco. I meet new people, establish myself. I start building out new ventures like ASC Cap and eventually Network Right, all of which leads me to where I'm at today. Network Right, for example, one of my main, if not my main focus right now, is a business and venture that I've been building out these last couple of years. We have a office here in San Francisco. We've tripled our team in size over the last couple of years. We're approaching 20 members on our team. We work with really great clients, and we've built something I think that has the potential to scale even further, and I'm really proud of. We're a tech managed service provider where we provide IT infrastructure to startups who don't have it and help them build that out. And it's a business I'm really proud of, and it's a team I'm really proud of. And with that, it's completely outside of the content creation space. So it's one of the first times in my career that I'm not directly involved in like a content created related business. And that's a huge change of pace for me, at least. So it took me walking away from content creation after so long to really appreciate it. Because you see, I spent so much of my early life with the mantra, you have to be creating more than you're consuming. And I spent like 2016 through 2019 just consuming, doing the opposite, taking it all in, absorbing it all in, and researching and listening and watching others out there to kind of rekindle my passion for that, right? And it's now in this post-content creation era, freeing and the greatest freedom I have, in the sense it feels like I'm back to square one because I don't have all these responsibilities. I don't have this business to uphold. I don't have people to pay and payroll. And in the sense of content creation, I don't have to rely on it for a living anymore. And that takes me back to, again, why and when I started on YouTube, and where I use the medium of content creation where I upload now purely as a creative outlet and purely just to create for the sake of creating. Now that all takes me to what's next and what I have planned for the future in this space of content creation. I've already established that my businesses and the main focuses that I'm focused on, I've already established obviously that my business like Network Right are completely outside of the content creation space, as well as ASC Cap. However, I would be remiss, I'd be lying if I had said that in the last couple of years, I didn't miss that creative hunger. I didn't miss that creative outlet, that I didn't miss the sense of having an idea and bringing it to life and having these projects come to fruition. And what I will say is now at this point in my life, where I'm at currently, with my other businesses and ventures in a spot where I'd say are doing very well, and I would hope only continue to grow and, again, continue to put in effort to do so. However, creatively, mentally, personally, I do have aspirations to fulfill content goals and content creation goals that I never got to hit. I don't want to leave this space thinking like, did I have what it took to get to the 100,000 subscriber mark, the million subscriber mark, or what have you. And the more I see the landscape and world of content creation changing today, where many people are either doing it full time or for a living, and the notion that it's a job is not a crazy notion this day and age, you also see many people doing it as hobbies, as passion projects, while sustaining a full-time job or other business, or it being a medium for their business. And I want to step back in that arena and approach it with that same sense of freedom that got me started, while still being able to create whatever, whenever, and however I please, challenging myself to see if I can do it again. And this channel is an example of that. I started this early in the pandemic because I wanted to create a lifestyle channel on YouTube just to see if I could do it and start from zero again and approach it in a different way and approach content that I was never known to be doing. And I'll be honest, during the pandemic, like many of us, that motivation fell by the wayside because of so many reasons. But I'm sitting here today in this video and it coming full circle and answering the question, what would I do if I was to start my content creation career over again? By saying, and to some degree, I am trying to do that. I want to start slow. I don't want to set too much ambitious goals and, come out the gates too hard, but I understand what I want out of it. And I understand those milestones I want to set for myself, for this channel, as well as Digital Dojos, the original tech channel that I was talking about earlier, and revitalize and reapproach those in ways that I think are fulfilling for me personally, inspiring creatively, and hopefully down the road hitting goals as well as, the other side of that, and eventually exploring what it means to have, again, the financial side of those and the business side of those become factors again down the road if I so choose to. But that's a notion. I want to choose to do that if I ever plan to do so. So, all in all, I can talk about the mistakes and say the things that I've done, good or bad, but ultimately, as always, they have all led me to where I'm at today. And while, yes, there's things I can dwell on and say I would change, the last 2 decades have taught me a tremendous amount about myself, personally, professionally. It's afforded me countless opportunities in my life up until this point, and has introduced me to amazing people, as well as support of the community throughout the years who has followed me and pushed me along the way and got me to where I'm at. Creating is and will always be in me, regardless of the business or space that I'm in. I can't change that. And I can't change the past either, but I can learn from it and hopefully use it to help others and pave out a better future. So I hope in this, it provides some insight to some of you out there who are looking to start your own journey, or somewhere along whatever era you are in your own stage and career, and hope it helps you, guide you to the point where you want to get to, and potentially push you to where you want to be. And if that's the case, then it's all been worth it. Thanks for watching.